Okay, that's nice and loud. All right, over to you. Thanks, Karissa.
Perfect. Hey, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm actually in London, so it's not very early, but it's early enough. Um, but yeah, analytics is a topic that I'm a huge nerd about. So I will talk for a while. So definitely, I want to make sure that we have time for questions afterwards. So if anything, like just shout when we have, if I keep going over, that would be great. For some background knowledge about me, I am a knowledge base owner and customer education lead at an analytics and feedback company. Shocker for analytics and feedback. Like I said, I'm currently based in the UK, but my partner and I are digital nomads. So we're waiting to get back traveling again. And funnily enough, the first time that I was introduced to documentation in the sense of actually becoming a documentarian and having it as a career path was at Write the Docs Prague. So Write the Docs has a very special place in my heart because of that. Analytics. All right, we're just gonna go in. So with analytics for documentation, how do you get it? What do you need and what actually qualifies as just useful data? But besides the whole analytics piece, it's just data in general. So what is the best thing to have about your documentation, or what stats are the best thing to have? And I divide that data into three groups. So the first one is basic. So just basic stats that include health metrics and the bare minimum that we should have about our documentation in general. And it kind of gets you better acquainted with the content you're writing and your docs. So this includes data like page views, bounce rate, average time on the page, things that you usually get on a documentation platform or something like Google Analytics. The second is the analytics piece. So this is, I use the word analytics and kind of switch it out with like visualization. So when I think analytics, I think anything that I can visualize and I can see happening on the user's journey. So this includes tools like Heatmaps, recordings, funnels, and forms. And this is the piece that we're gonna dive into today. But the last piece is user feedback. So tools like surveys, polls, approval rating, and NPS. So these tools essentially allow you to walk right up to the user and just be like, "Yo, what are you thinking about this doc? Do you hate it? Do you love it?" And that's a really cool feature as well. So with these three groups in mind, you can start to piece together a narrative or the story of the user visiting your docs and your documentation. So basic data, for example, answers the questions like, what is the health of the documentation? What docs should I be focusing on improving? What are high performers in general? Or what docs just aren't getting visits and just need to be removed? They aren't part of time or part of your time that you should be prioritizing, really. Then you have analytics data. So what part of your user journey is and isn't working. But it also shows you where the user's clicking, what exactly they're reading in the documents that you're producing, and if they're even seeing your content in general, like the content that's really important to you. The last bit, the user feedback tells you, what your users like and what they dislike. And this can be about your documentation specific docs, or it can be about your entire documentation, whether you manage a help center or a knowledge base. It's just information that comes directly from the user. And all three really have a place in documentation management. And those are the three types of data that I live by and kind of marry together so that I can kind of grab information from all bits. So like I said, today, solely analytics piece. And specifically, we're going to be chatting about heat maps and recordings. So the fun part, explaining heat maps and recordings if you're not familiar. Heat maps and recordings are very similar in the sense that they give you a visual representation of what the user is viewing in your docs, but they deliver it in a different way. So a heat map is going to be an average or like an aggregate of what your users are seeing. And it's going to show you an average of where they're clicking, all averages over a bunch of sessions. Whereas recordings are going to show you individual users, and it's going to show you, rather than just one document, it's going to show you the entire journey through help center knowledge base, or just where you're storing your documentation. So you'll be able to see the first landing page that this user goes on, and then all the documents in between and when they decide to leave, and maybe even why they're leaving. So the first we're going to get into is heat maps, and I'm actually going to show you a live one. Ooh. So this is our most popular page, which is our installation page. So we're this is tackling the beginning part of a user journey when someone buys our tool or they are on a trial and they need to set it up. And just before I start, I just want to confirm you guys can see this heat map, correct? Cool. I'm just going to take the silence as cool right now. So this heat map is, like I said, on one of our most popular pages. And so this is one that we have running all the time because there's just a lot of insight that we can gain. And so what you're seeing as a heat map in general, just as like a definition, is a screenshot of your document or page that you're targeting. And you're going to see these clusters over all call to actions, words, images. And these clusters show you where the users are clicking the most. And it has a scale of hot, which is red, and cool to blue. So we can see there's not a lot of clicks here, enough to kind of show a cluster, but not enough to show red like these guys over here, which would tell me those are hot contenders. And there's also a bunch of options that you can get with heat maps where you can see different like move and scroll, but we're just going to start with this one first. This is, like I said, the click heat map. And so what I'm seeing as I'm going through and like what's kind of going in my mind, we're going to analyze this together a bit, is first just the heat clusters in general, right? So this is our installation guide table, and it lists all of the integrations that we have with different platforms. And so automatically my eyes are drawn to Google Tag Manager, Shopify, Webflow, and WordPress, right? Because that's where the most clicks are happening. So this tells me a few things. I know these are popular, so that's great to know. If I pair it with my basic analytics, right, I can say, oh, I'm going to look into these 4, and I'm going to pair this with my basic stats to see, is it true? Are they getting just natural traffic in general? You know, are these the highest installation guides that we have? And it kind of helps me prioritize what I want to work on with my team, what we need to improve. Maybe we want to make sure that since these are the most popular on the table, I want to make sure that these 4 are at the best they can be for the time being, right? So I want to make sure that the user experience is great. They can go to Google Tag Manager, they'll find what they need. And it also lets me know that based on these clicks, the installation guide is at a good place, right? It doesn't need to be higher up along the page. It seems like there's enough people getting to it and getting to the guides that they need. So if we keep scrolling down and taking a look, we can also see that people are clicking on steps. So these are like, it's a how-to guide. So there's a step-by-step guide. We can see that we have links in the steps. So that's a popular link. People are clicking on that link, which is great, which means that they're going to it says go to your dashboard. So that means that they're going to their dashboard and they're kind of following along, which is what we want to see. We do see this actually saw this morning when I was looking over this, which is not good. This is an image of our tracking code that you install on your page. And if you look, there's right here, it's a copy to clipboard, and that's in the UI, right? But it looks like you can see this is very faint, but it's still there, clicks from users, which tells me that people might think that this is actually a live button, which isn't good. So this is something that I'm gonna have to take back to the team and just say, hey, you see this? Like this, we probably should kind of tackle this, maybe make it more prominent that this is just an image and this isn't something that they can copy, maybe even change it and not show the tracking code, or maybe make it like a GIF so they can see that it's moving and it's not something they can click on. But still, insight that I would take for granted because I think, oh yeah, this is clear, but I mean, it's obviously not at this point if people are clicking on it. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I got from this click heat map. So I'm going to move it over to move. And so move is similar to click, but the user doesn't have to click. So you're just seeing an aggregate of people moving their mouse over the entire page. So you're going to see this a lot over text and images. And the funny thing is, you'll see this in recordings as well, is that when people are reading your documentation, their mouse actually moves over the words as they read. And it's funny because you start seeing these patterns that people do. And I didn't think I did this, but I definitely do, because you're more aware. And now that I'm telling you, you're definitely going to be more aware of it, and you're going to start realizing that you do it as well. But it's really neat, because then you can see in heat maps that people are actually reading the content, and you can also see it on recordings when people are real time, people following along, like, oh, okay, this is where they stopped reading. So again, I assumed this is what this was going to look like for the table, because it did have a lot of traffic and a lot of clicks. So hotter over here, you can kind of see the yellow, and it's getting more clicks and so more movement. And what we're seeing, right, is we're seeing that people are reading through the steps. Again, hovering over the picture, which we probably don't want, but especially over that button. But as the steps are going on, we can see that the movement is kind of slowing down, which makes sense because they're getting towards the end. Maybe they're they're figuring out they don't need it anymore. They get the concept and they're installing it properly. But the one thing that does concern me here is that this step right here is how to verify the tracking code. And verifying the tracking code is something that we get a lot of support tickets about. People are always, they get to the point where they're ready for get their data and or use our tool in general, and then it hasn't been verified because something went wrong and they don't know because the step was skipped. So this makes me think, okay, maybe there's something we can do to make it prominent. Maybe there's something that we can bring it up earlier in the doc, or just make it more seen. And we can confirm this with scroll to see if we really are losing a lot of people on that step. So what you're seeing with scroll is a heat map that shows you how far people are actually going down your page and what percentage of your audience is seeing it. So for this, I can see that over 97% of our users are actually seeing the installation video, which makes a lot of sense to me because a lot of people's screens will stop at that point. And that's what the average fold is. The average fold is telling you where the average screen stops when they land on this page. And so it makes sense to me that this is a really hot area because everyone can see it. Again, confirming what we found about the table, we're having about 90% of users getting to the table and about 81 seeing the entire table. So it's good standing, love it, all about it. And then as we scroll down, as we're getting to that last step, you can start seeing that it starts changing to that cold color until you get to no color at all. So no one's hanging out down here because they just didn't hang out down here, I guess, or they just got done with the steps. But for step 6, like I said, where we started losing the movement, we're down to 38% of our users get there. That's not too low, but it's still low enough for me to look into it and be like, all right, bringing this to the writers and saying, how do we get more people to see this? Because that's still about what, like 60 or about 60, more like 50% of our users are 100% seeing it, and they're at least to step 5, right? And then when they go down, then they're kind of losing that bit. So we still want to bring that number up because 38 to 40%, right, is only are seeing that. But yeah, so that's what I really get from this heat map. And we use the heat maps for a lot of our pages that are just really important to us that we want to make sure that we're on top of and keeping up to date. But with heat maps in general, what I would suggest is to chat with your team and find a tool that works for you guys, and really trial it, see if you're getting the value you need, because a lot of different heat maps will have different features that you can use that I didn't even go over and can really help with your documentation. So next is recordings, and the tool that we use for recordings, unfortunately, has a column that shows user data. So just user data in the sense of like we give them an ID number and what country they're in. So I can't blur that with share screen. So this just gonna have to do it for us. but it still shows really good information for you. So if we're rewinding a bit, with analytics in general, recordings is going to give you the most content and the most results to work, or data, sorry, to work with. They give you a variety of information, but ultimately it's a recreation of what the user's entire journey was. And I find this so vital because this is where I find bugs. This is where I find maybe, like I said, bugs in the platform, but just something wrong with my writing, or like wrong in the flow. You know, if I'm pointing them into one direction to solve a problem, sometimes my writing's pointing them in the opposite direction, and that's not what I want. So in this recording, we're seeing our page targeting stuff. So it's explaining how users can focus on specific pages. What I'm looking for is what's catching their eye, what's working, what are they reading, and you can kind of see it like right there. Like I said, you can see that they're reading over the example, their mouse is moving over it. There's some crazy movements, but ultimately, you know, I'm seeing that our call out box is working. The call out boxes are doing their job. We know that we're getting their attention, and it's an important rule that we put there. So we did our job. We selected the right content for that call out box, right? The wild movements, that can sometimes mean frustration. So if they're not finding the information they need, if they're really confused, people start to move their mouse a bit because they're just trying to get their frustration out. But in this instance, this is sped up. I think what they're doing is, I think they're going up to the top and clicking the tab, and they're applying the rules. They're looking at the tab while they're building it, and going back and forth, which is great because then you can see that information as well. Like, okay, great, they're using my guides to follow along. But yeah, so and this one actually goes on to going to a document about turning on or turning on a tool within the tool we sell. And so to me, it was a successful journey where I could see they found all their information and they were on a page for a bit and then they left. So the documents did their job. They found the solution to whatever problems they were having. And these recordings work better than traditional user testing because this is essentially what it is, right? And with user testing, it's really difficult because when you get a group of people together and show them your documentation and just say, hey, tell us what's going on, you know, you're usually giving them a list of specific tasks or defined tasks to do, and within a time frame. And it's not a natural environment. You know, there's pressure. You're watching on your camera, and it's not the best results because it's not normal. But this is really normal because they're going through the actual documentation on their own time, and they're actually using it for a specific purpose, the purpose that you want to learn about. So with both heat maps and recordings, there's a variety of tools to choose from. I know I do work for Hotjar, but like I always am like very adamant when I do these type of talks, like Hotjar is obviously not the only tool, right? And it really depends on what your team needs. And so I always like to kind of provide more alternative tools as well, because we might not be the best tool for your team depending on how big your team is or what you actually want out of a tool. So things like Hotjar, SessionCam, ClickTail, However, Lucky Orange, they'll all cover you in that heat map and recording department. And like I said before, the best option is to just try them all, try 2, try 3, and see what works best. So I am wrapping it up. I do see the time, but I think I just wanted to get a few action items out just for you guys to kind of help with what I would want your biggest takeaways to be from this. The first is like a movie night. You know, set up a ritual with recordings. Make it like a movie night, a movie lunch, a movie breakfast, rather than you know, taking it on yourself. So we started this on our team. We did an hour every Monday. We ordered breakfast, we ordered lunch, depending on time zones, and we set intentions at the beginning of the call and said, all right, today we're going to tackle looking at this new document that James put out, and we want to see if it's performing well, what issues are happening, and so on. And we sit there for the hour, and without fail, every single time we left that call, there was a bullet point list of things that we wanted to tackle, things we wanted to try, things we wanted to experiment with, things that we need to just change for that week. And it helped with our planning for the week as well, because we knew what was a priority, because you see it in one recording, you see it in two, you see it in three, and then an issue starts emerging from your docs that you know that you can tackle. So that's one of my favorite things to do, honestly. Next would be target high traffic. And this is data in general is really, really, really overwhelming. Especially from personal experience and from when I'm talking to other people in the Write the Docs community, a lot of the time, it's just one person on the team or yourself owning all of the help docs, owning all of the documentation. And so the worst thing that you could do is be like, all right, let's do it, and just jump in. Do jump in, but focus on the highest traffic pages first, or your most popular pages, or just pages that are most important to your company and your organization, right? Because once you master looking at all this different types of data and analytics on those particular pages, you can cast a larger net. You can go farther and you can start grabbing things, but you don't want to go too big first, because it's very overwhelming and you just kind of get discouraged. And I've made that mistake, and this is why I'm very adamant about starting on most important high traffic pages. Third is make mistakes. So especially when it comes to if you start tackling user feedback and making mistakes with like surveys, maybe sending out too many or adding too many questions, even mistakes in like what you're targeting for recordings or what you're targeting for heat maps. Maybe you're missing a huge portion of documents that you didn't think you needed to look at. But it's really important to make those mistakes and not worry about making those mistakes, because there's so much data out there. You can literally get data about anything and stats about anything. And the most important thing is just to be okay with making mistakes. And it's not a failure if you learn why you failed in the first place, right? And lastly, it's get buy-in early, and involve stakeholders with the findings that you have with your tools. So, heat maps and recordings are kind of sexy to them, because they're just like, ooh, what's this color? Ooh, what's this? And it looks really fancy. And it's really nice to share, and it's easy to share what you're finding on your documents. It's also great because it shows the value that you're bringing to the company. It shows the value that you're bringing to the support team if you're working with a support team, or just the value that you're bringing to the user. It also helps getting that buy-in because it helps with resources allocation, right? And like further down the line, if you need more team members, if you need a better platform. And it also makes sure that the upper management and, again, stakeholders, execs, whoever, are paying attention to the docs, because that's always something, again, that I find really common with us in the documentation community is it's really hard to show our value, because we know it, obviously, or we do it full time. We know it's valuable, but it's sometimes hard to kind of express that to others in the company. So these type of tools to help with the visualization really help show that value, and you can do it early, and then you get their trust in the beginning. But that is all I got. If you have any questions, even after we do this Q&A, feel free. My email is karissa@hotjar.com. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm also on the Write the Docs channel.
Excellent. Thanks, Karissa. So yeah, we've got a pretty small cozy group today. So if you have any questions for Karissa, feel free to unmute yourself and ask that directly. You don't have to chat it. Put it in the chat window. I've got a question while someone else thinks about a question. So we use Hotjar at our work, and what I do is pretty much every week I'm doing like a update for my team in terms of what customers have provided feedback through surveys. So someone's landed on a page and found a page useful or not useful, they provided us feedback. So my question is, on the Hotjar survey specifically, there's an option to get back in touch with the customers. So sometimes they'll leave. I think it could be one of those customizable options, but you have an option of someone said, we don't like this document because it doesn't provide us enough examples or whatever. And then they leave in their email addresses saying that, once you've rectified it, get back in touch and tell us what you've done to the page, like if you've updated it or let us know, sort of thing. Have you come across those sort of, instances where you've got in touch back in the customer, like with the customers who provided that direct feedback in terms of documentation?
Yeah, I actually do it a lot. I actually sent an email yesterday before I was done for the day. Um, it's one of the things where I like reaching out, even if it's not someone directly saying, getting back in touch with me. It's if they're leaving their email, it's like they want you to know who they were saying that, right?
Yep.
And so what I like to do is sometimes even if they don't say anything, I will or say anything like a question, I'll still email them and be like, hey, listen, I'm Karissa, the documentation owner, documentation, I'm the docs owner. And you know, you said this was difficult. Do you think maybe we can take a call? Walk me through it. Let me know if this is difficult for you. Great. What ways would it be better? Would you be interested into letting me have a session with you where you kind of go over your problems with the docs that you're seeing, or even just send me a quick couple bullet points of how we can improve. And just really starting that conversation is really helpful because it's funny because I had a call with someone in marketing the other day, and he said, we like to think that we're the experts of what we own. So like we're the experts of our docs,
Mhm.
but we're really not the experts. It's the users that are using it. They're the experts. They know what they're doing. They're the best people to talk with about it. And so they'll find things that you will never see because you're just, you have your blinders on and you know what's going on in the documentation. But they really are the experts. So I'm all for that, and it's really valuable as well. And then of course, like when they kind of start the conversation and they're willing to help out, I always send them like a link to get a free T-shirt, or just to kind of thanks for and encourage them to do it again. Encourage them to keep telling us what's bad, keep telling us what's good. Just keep being vocal.
Cool. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, hi, Abhilash here. I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I work for a hardware company. We have products which obviously go out in the field, and the documentation that we make are directed towards our users. So they're not on our website at all. So in my sort of a situation, what sort of tips, tricks, and suggestions or processes would you think about if I had to analyze how my documents are performing?
Mhm. And you said the documents aren't on a live website, or?
They are not on a website. We send them out via email or via an internet
Mhm.
shortcut to the users as and when they require it. And of course, there will be one copy with the hardware that we send out. But apart from that,
Mhm.
it's on demand only.
Okay, so for that, yeah, it's really difficult to get analytics on that just because, like you said, it's in that like PDF or it's in that email format. But in that case, I would say that user feedback is the best solution. So even if you send out and start sending a survey, maybe 4 days after you send it or a couple days afterwards to that user that requested it, and just it can be super simple as well because you know yourself when you get emails with surveys, you're kind of just like meh, but if it's a simple survey with like maybe just like a smiley face and like a sad face, or just maybe one or two questions with like, did this help you? Or it could be super specific, like if you knew that they reached out for um a particular tool that they're trying to fix, you can send a survey specifically like, did we solve your question about, and then list the tool so that you can try to get more information from what you can improve.
Yeah, agreed. That's what we're currently doing. I don't know why my video got off,
No,
but
you're
yeah,
fine.
that's currently what we are doing. We just have a simple survey form with 3 or 4 questions, and the first question is dead simple. The question is,
Yeah.
did the document solve your problem or the issue that you were trying to solve? So that's where we start, and then and yeah, we've got 3 questions wherein they just select a yes or no, and then we have a text box which almost never gets filled. So
Yeah.
that's a different discussion altogether, I
No,
guess.
the surveys are difficult sometimes because it really depends on what group of people you're talking to. So it's interesting as well because you can see different countries. So like Germany, for example, you don't really get a lot of answer, text box filled in. But the US, I mean, there's not enough room in the text box for people to fill in their comments. So it's really it depends on region as well. But what I would say is like, even if you did some type of user testing, if you're not getting enough information from the user feedback, and just set up a call maybe where you again offer them, if you guys offer like t-shirts or discounts or coupon voucher, whatever, and just set something up where you have a call with them and just say, hey, if you're interested, you use our docs a lot. can you take a look at a few things for me and just tell me if you're getting what you need? And that would be a really cool exercise as well to do, because it is a unique situation where you're sending out it's not live online. So it's difficult to get all of like the page views, clicks, and things like that.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, that's currently what we do. You're right. Yeah. Thanks so much.
No worries.
Hey, I'm cooking in the background, so I apologize if I'm going to have to dash off as I do this. Firstly, I love this. I've never actually gone in and seen all these heat maps and things. I think they're like, I can see huge values and being able to sell it inside the organization. I can really see that. I'm wondering if you've actually gone in and made use of things like actually working out what you're trying to achieve. And I'm coming out of an engineering background where we used to go in and say, what is the goal? And then go in and say, what is the signal which goes in and shows us that we're meeting that goal? And then what is the metric we'll use to show that signal?
Okay, so you're asking like how I would use analytics to go through that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the step before you come in. It's before you go into the meeting and say, hey guys, let's watch these videos. These are the things we're going to look for. I mean, have you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, so what we usually do, because I find that my goals as a documentarian might be a lot different than our company's goals, right? Because I'm just like, oh, I want the user to have the best experience. And sometimes they're like, oh, we really want them just to see X, you know? So what I kind of do is I will look at what we're writing, and then I'll kind of align it with the overall companies. We use OKRs or goals in general, or for our quarterly goals. And so the first example I can think of is we have a contact form on our page, or that's hosted in our documentation. And so with a contact form, it goes straight to our support team, and we suggest articles while the user's filling out the form based on what they're typing, so that they can see the documents that will provide them with the answer, so they don't necessarily have to reach out to support. And so what we did when we wanted to spend time to improve it, it's like we looked at our company's goals, and then we said, okay, as a whole, we want the user to have the best experience. And for us, the best experience is them reading the documents and not having to wait 1 to 2 days for a response from our support team. So I would kind of look at our company's overall goals, and I would kind of look at the two together and say, okay, what goal does this fall under? Because that's our goal. So we would match up with the OKRs and say, okay, it falls over this goal or that the company has. And so I would say, all right, so let's look at recording. So I want to see a full recording flow of someone going into the knowledge base and just going straight to that contact form without looking at our docs, without looking at any content, and see why are they doing it? Why aren't they clicking on our call out boxes? Why aren't they clicking on a link that says, I have the answer to this problem here? And so I would look at heat maps as well and kind of decide what part of the contact form are they clicking on? What, as a whole, why are our users, scrolling past all of our main content blocks on our page? Because our contact button's at the bottom, right? After that, I would kind of, seeing the way that the users are using that page, that's when I would do the metric bit. So I would say, okay, I can see that users start seeing suggestions for documents during when they click on the description box, right? So they click on the subject and they start typing the subject, some things start showing up, but everybody I'm seeing is going directly to the description field and the full content of their email. They don't want to look at suggestions until they start writing their content, because they think it's just someone trying to push them in a different direction. So rather than saying, I want to reduce the number of people who are typing, just getting into the contact form in general, I automatically change my metric to, I want to reduce the number of people who make it past the description field. So I want to reduce those clicks beyond, which is like including a screenshot, entering a few other fields that we have. So I can see if I can see that if there's no clicks beyond that description field, we're doing our job and we're suggesting the right documentation. That's a very, very specific example, Cameron. So I'm not sure if I answered your question properly, but that's kind of that's kind of how I would start from like big picture and kind of make it into metrics that I know are important to our team.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Lovely. Thank you.
No problem.
Any more questions for Karissa? Okay. I take silence as a no. All right. So yeah, thanks, Karissa, for presenting on this really interesting topics. Like I said, I personally use Hotjar, and I really love the the surveys and the responses, because it allows us to directly talk to our customers, especially with documentation. So that's always like, you don't always get that superpower when you're a tech writer. Sometimes you work in places where you've got no direct access to customers, and something like this really helps, because you're actually showing the value in terms of, since we've started working on the documentation, we can show them in the last 6 months, we've got 91% people have upvoted our documentation as opposed to actually asking questions. So that's always a good thing. Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Again, I know we've sort of wrapped up early today, but I'm going to stop recording for a minute.